Hi, I'm Vic Vogle. Welcome to episode 4 of Mastering the Art of Questioning. We're going to be talking about building rapport and some other complex uh, uh, skills that leaders normally have to use pretty much daily, and maybe if not daily, certainly unless weekly. So, this is to give you an idea of how you can use questioning to manage these particular skills from a communication perspective. So uh, let's go ahead and get started. We're going to be talking about first about building rapport and trust. And of course, that's a bedrock of any strong relationship, whether it's professional or personal. It's about creating a safe and collaborative environment where individuals feel comfortable sharing their thoughts and ideas. Questions that foster rapport often focus on getting to know someone better or showing a genuine interest in demonstrating empathy and compassion and a lot of the emotional intelligence areas. So, active listening is really the cornerstone of effective questioning. So, those are some things that you should know that will help you build rapport and build trust between you and your people. So, let's take a look at a few questions that you might use to build rapport and trust, just to give you a feel or an example for how you could use questioning to build trust and rapport. So, one of the questions might be, what are you most passionate about in your work? What we're doing is we're trying to get some information about this individual, how they think, why they think the way they do in a lot of cases. What are some of the things you enjoy doing outside of work? Now, you might think this is a casual kind of question, but it delivers a lot of really good information when you get down to it. It's one of those questions that can determine personality. It can determine um, cultural perspectives. It can give you a lot of insight about how people feel. It can determine character for that matter. Another question might be, what are your preferred ways of working and communicating? So I think this is an excellent question, particularly for someone you're bringing on new into the organization or is maybe transferred into your area. Uh, it gives you insight to that person. So all these questions are aimed at gaining some insight, and you're asking them in an empathetic, compassionate way. And you're paying close attention to all of the things that you learned in earlier podcasts about nonverbal communication and those kinds of things. So the whole communication process. So um, another area might be providing constructive feedback, and I think about this like performance discussions, and not necessarily just the annual performance discussion, but ongoing performance discussions when you're training somebody to become more effective in their job in those areas. So Uh, when you're giving feedback, though, it's especially difficult to do sometimes when it's critical. Uh, like if it's a situation where you're making the difference between where maybe you're going to sustain employment or not, something along those lines, where the difficulty of the feedback is a little enhanced. It's a little more serious. It's a little more meaningful. That can be really challenging at times. Instead of pointing out flaws, what you want to be doing is using question to guide individuals towards self-reflection and growth. And so what happens is you're asking these questions in a way where they're sort of answering them as you ask the various questions. They're sort of answering the question themselves. And when they give you the answer, it becomes sort of self evident to them what the solution to whatever the issue is we're trying to improve. So, what this does is it empowers them uh, to own their own development, to feel comfortable with what they've said and what they've learned and the changes they're about to make. So those are pretty important things to understand about constructive feedback. So let's take a look at some questions you might ask in this light. What do you think went well in this project? And what could have been done better, or how could we improve it? Another question might be, what challenges did you face and how did you approach them? Do you see how this could get the person discussing this and thinking about it? Because, they have to think about it. They have to think about it relative to what they did, what they didn't do, etc. And another question might be, what support do you need to succeed in this area from me? And these are the things that begin to help employees feel like you care about them, you value them, you think they're critical to your success as well as the organization's success. This tends to make employees feel valued. And when employees feel valued, they tend to want to be engaged in the jobs they're doing. So let's look at another area where you might use this. Setting expectations is actually one of those areas that Gallup has said causes the most dissatisfaction with leaders and organizations is when their expectations aren't clear. So setting expectations and providing clear direction is crucial for a team and a team's success. And questions can be invaluable in this process if you're ensuring everyone on this is on the same page and you're helping them understanding their roles and responsibilities, not just theirs, but also in relation to others in the team. That's pretty critical information for employees to have to be highly effective. So let's kind of take a look at some questions we might ask to help kind of get the discussion going about setting expectations and making those clear. It might one question you might ask is, what are your thoughts on the proposed goals for the quarter? So getting employees involved in deciding what those goals ought to be and what they think about those goals makes them feel important, makes them feel valued, like they're contributing something to the organization. And that contribution, that purpose is what drives motivation, inspires employees, and drives motivation in employees. Here's another one. Do you have all the resources you need to meet these expectations? Um, I can't tell you the number of times I've resolved issues between employees and leaders, and a lot of the time it was I didn't get the training I need to get, I didn't get the materials I needed to do the job, but then they're saying I'm not doing the job, and they don't ask them, they tell them what the issues and the flaws are, just pretty much like that feedback. In other words, so you can see how this is building. We're talking about building trust. We're talking about building rapport. Then we're talking about using constructive feedback processes. So when you're talking about expectations and meeting those expectations, if for some reason there's a variance, those other processes can help you clarify the expectations further, enhance the expectations, etc. So here's another one. What are your priorities for the next week, and how can I support you in getting where you're needing to be? Uh, that's something that's very critical. Again, it shows your interest in the employee. but it's talking about how can you support them and them achieving their objectives and meeting those expectations, maybe even exceeding those expectations. And that's really what happens when these are clear, when you're using the constructive feedback, you're building trust, you're getting rapport with your employees. When you're discussing things like expectations and goals and what you need to hit those goals, employees often sometimes get excited about these. It's a dopamine rush almost, an expectation of something you're looking forward to releases a dopamine. That makes you feel good. And many times they exceed those expectations. And that's exciting for them to do that. And it kind of leaves them craving it to do that again if they're rewarded and the feedback can also be positive on the constructive feedback can also be very positive too and highly motivating from that standpoint. So often leaders are engaged in difficult conversations, and those different conversations may be different than feedback. It may be these conversations are pretty much inevitable in most leadership's roles, and the key approach to difficult conversations is to have empathy and respect, and to have some compassion and understanding, and making sure that again, the employee feels valued while you're talking to him about these difficult discussions. These could be discussions about maybe somebody isn't, you've noticed non-verbally somebody is just not, they're usually, up and about and talking with everybody and excited, but they're staying kind of themselves or in a desk. They don't seem right. There's something about their non-verbal behavior that's not right. And you might even see a decline in workflow. And so when you want to approach this person to kind of see what's going on. So, but you have to do this with a little respect, a little empathy and compassion for that person, because something's not right, and you want to go in with a questioning process that can gather some information. As you gather that information, then you can ask further questions that might be helpful in that line. It could also be a situation where two people have conflict with each other and you need to have some understanding. So your questions need to explore this topic, the sensitive topic areas, to help you understand what's going on, what's different, what are the perspectives around that, and to find out some information if it happened to be a conflict situation where some common ground is where you can kind of come together and solve resolve that conflict, because you don't want to just stop the conflict. You want to resolve it so that you don't have to cope with it in the future. It doesn't get in the way in the future. So let's take a look at a few things that questions you might ask to resolve difficult conversations, or to approach difficult conversations. You might ask a question like, can you help me understand what happened from your point of view? Now, if you've got two people in conflict with each other, you're going to ask that same question to both people. Okay, so what we're doing is from your point of view, from how you see what's going on, and you're going to kind of then get to see the differences, but you also might discover some similarities as they explain what goes on. This person they both might, what you might find is they both misunderstood something. So, that's why you want to approach it from this perspective. Why questioning is so good with difficult conversations. Here's a question. What are your biggest concerns about this situation? You get a deep understanding about each person's concern. Again, you might find similarities there. What solutions can we explore together to address this? In other words, how can you and I together, how can we what are the things we can do to explore how we're going to address this? What kind of solutions can we work up together? If it's between two people, you might say, I need to bring you both together and kind of understand where some common solutions are that we agree upon here in those areas. So that's kind of some areas that you can some questions you can think about. Now, you're going to think of your own questions, and you have to realize different situations will require different questions at the time. And you won't get everything right the first few times you do it. But as you do this, as you practice this, you will begin to see that it becomes more natural and the right questions will come in the right way. I mean, I used to watch movies and try to listen to, for example, if there was an argument in a movie between two people, I'd say, what questions, how would I handle that if I were dealing with that situation? Or how did the person in the movie handle that? Did they use questioning technique? Was this something that they pulled? So there's a lot of places you can practice besides work and, your family or your personal life. So just, the deal is to try to practice and keep using these and think of the different kinds of questions that you might ask in a situation. If you're going into a conflict situation and ahead of time, plan it out, thinking about this ahead of time. Okay? So let's see. Another area that people often deal with that requires some questioning, some deeper understanding is diversity. In today's globalized world, leaders, they kind of have to adapt at working with people from diverse backgrounds and varying communication styles or varying cultural backgrounds, etc. This is something I know is being talked about a lot about you need to eliminate it right now. But I don't want you to think of diversity in terms of whether you need to hire somebody that's not qualified for the job or that has is a particular minority or something like that. I want you to think about it this way. You could hire somebody who looks like you and has a background like you, has a master's degree and, X number of years in business and is the same race, tends to come from the same socioeconomic background. You could try to hire everybody just like you. And the problem is uh, you can actually do that. I mean, you could just simply be that selective. But when you look out at your customers, that's not who they are. And the likelihood of trying to hire people who are excited about providing your customer needs that way doesn't doesn't link up. So that's kind of how I want you to think about diversity. You got to be able to bring people into your organization that kind of reflect your customers so that they can in fact relate and provide solutions that the customers might appreciate. And that's hard to do when you don't have the diversity within your organization. Now, managing that diversity makes a difference too. It makes it a little tougher. So you got to be able to adapt your questioning techniques to be sensitive to individual needs and cultural differences and variant differences. And that's an important kind of thing to understand as you're doing this. And so here's some questions you might use in a diverse world environment or a diverse situation. Uh, what are your preferred ways of receiving information and feedback? Now, I like this question. I don't care who you are, because if a leader can understand how someone prefers to interact and how to provide feedback to them in a way that's beneficial, you're going to be a lot more effective in helping that individual. Yeah, how do you like to receive information? I mean, is it by phone? Is it by text message, in person? When I'm talking to you about, for example, expectations, do you want me to be here personally and cover those with you so you can ask me questions while we're doing this? Or can I just send you an email with the expectations? And then if you have a problem, you can come get me. How do you want to do this? What's the best way that works for you? And that's really helps employees because some people like a lot of information. They like that feedback. They like that dialogue. Other people don't want to be bothered with it too much. And you kind of have to judge which one works best for which employee. So here's another question. Are there any cultural nuances I should be aware of when working with you? And that seems to be an outright direct situation, but it's an important question. It's one that shows sincerity and empathy and concern for the employee. You're saying, look, you struggle with English, so is there something I can do to help you to reduce that amount of struggling you're doing with the English language? And maybe it's a language course, or maybe it's being able to put an app on their company phone that translates so that they can uh, say something in there and then type in the language they want it repeated by, and together you guys can talk through that phone to each other, which uh, is something that's fairly recent and uh, very helpful in a lot of situations. So, or perhaps there's something about, let's say, a nonverbal thing like personal space. Maybe they don't like to have you there real close to them. Okay. So, that's one of the things that they may be considering telling you. So here's another question. How can I support you in your success in this team? And that's important because uh, sometimes when an employee has a language issue or a cultural variance with the team, they may be, the only person who is culturally variant in the team. And having the leader help the team understand by having to say, taking a few minutes to the team and talking about the nuances or the differences or some of the ways that this person prefers to get feedback, etc., as part of the team is awful interesting. In fact, these are pretty good questions to ask in a team and have the team go around and talk about each of them relative to that. For example, how each team member likes to receive information and how they like to get feedback. If every other team member knew that, then that's a pretty powerful bit of information about the team and their interaction capabilities from that. Uh, so I'd like to talk to you. That's just a few of the complex areas that you deal with. I try to pick a couple that you have frequency of interaction with and how questioning can help you enhance your interaction with your employees, help them gain the information they need to do their job better. And of course, the questioning and how you conduct that questioning from an interpersonal communication perspective is very critical. So let's cover a few key points I'd like to go back and have you kind of grasp and remember. First of all, build rapport and trust by asking questions that demonstrate genuine interest and create a supportive and helpful environment. During constructive feedback, guide individuals towards growth and improvement through questions that encourage self reflection and self discovery in the questioning process. While setting expectations, ensure shared understanding and buy in by asking questions that clarify roles and responsibilities and goals, and so people have a chance to ask questions about them and input about them and tell you what they think about them, and you can discuss this through, and then figure out how you can support them to get them to achieve those goals and those expectations. When you're navigating difficult or sensitive conversations, do it with empathy and respect by using questions to understand a lot of the different perspectives and the different approaches to things. And when you're focusing on diversity with individuals in the group, or the individual themselves, your communication style and your questioning techniques need to be sensitive to the individual needs of that person and the cultural differences of that person. So don't be afraid to ask how they want to be communicated with and what kinds of things are not normal for them in this culture. So you can avoid those things, but you can also, during this period of time, help this person learn to become a little more enculturated into our environment that they're working in. And that helps them quite a bit adjust away from those nuances or differences in that area. So, mastering the art of questions is a real game changer for a leader. It can make all the difference in the world. It can help you gain a lot of satisfaction from your employees towards you. It allows you to build a stronger relationship, to navigate these complex situations we've been talking about, and to create a more positive and productive work environment. And that's really normally the goal most of the time. So, uh, I hope you find this helpful and this series is being helpful. These podcasts uh, are found on my YouTube channel, Building Renaissance Leaders and Community. It's actually not a community now. I think they changed it just recently to posts. So it would be, instead of forward slash post, it's community, it'd be forward slash post. This is where you can go in there and ask questions and respond to some polls I have and look at some videos and comments that I may put in there to help leaders clarify things and become more effective in leadership. So it's kind of like a community. You can actually get a conversational thread going there. And also, you can find information about interpersonal communication. And I have some blogs on there, and I have some newsletters on my website, victorvogel.com. If you go there, a lot of times when I finish a podcast like this, I'll summarize the podcast and the newsletter. So, in case you don't want to watch the podcast, you can just go ahead and read the newsletter. Now, the podcasts are done in timestamps, and I do that so you can bookmark this channel. And you can always go find, for example, if you had a difficult discussion that you were going to have, say tomorrow morning or later this afternoon or something like that, you can actually go to my channel here, and find this series, find this podcast on questioning in difficult situations or complicated situations, and actually go in and watch that podcast. And you can actually look in the description and find the timestamp that allows you to go to, say, diverse questioning during diversity, around diversity and diversity situations, and you can relook at some of the key points and some of the sample questions, so you may get some ideas of how you want to conduct that diversity discussion. Uh, and because it's kind of hard to keep everything you got to learn to be a leader in your head, but it's nice to have a resource. And that's what I'm trying to do with all the podcasts I do, is try to help you uh, have a place to go that is free that you can use to kind of refresh your memory or look at something and maybe help stimulate your thinking about how you want to handle that. So we have one more podcast that's centered around ethics and how to use questions, when to use questions, when not to use questions, and how when questions you ask might be used to for the wrong reasons. So we want to cover that as the last segment of this particular series in this area. So I'll see you at the next podcast.